In today's video, we will be graphing rational functions. So when we're graphing rational functions, you can either graph the entire function by finding a table of values, which is in a different video, or you can graph it by translating the function to the left or right, up or down, and then using your y distortion, which is what we're going to do in this video. Your h value is your horizontal shift. Remember that goes in the opposite direction of the sign. So if this says x minus 2, then we will move the whole function to the right 2 spots. Your k value is your vertical shift in the same direction, meaning if this says plus 3, we would move the entire function up 3 spots. And the a value here is your y distortion, which means you're going to multiply all of your y values, your key points, by that value. Now recall that a function, 1 over x, which is your parent function, remember that it had the key points of 1, 1, and 2, 1 half, and also 1 half, 2. We used the negative versions of these also, so negative 1 was negative 1, negative 2 was negative 1 half, and negative a half was negative 2. And we got those values simply by plugging in a number for x and getting the y value. So our function, our general function, parent function, looked like this. Remember, it got close, really close to the y-axis, it got really close to the x-axis, but it didn't actually cross either one of those. Those were known as our asymptotes. So in this case, the asymptote for the y-axis is x equals 0. That's your vertical asymptote. And for this one is y equals 0. That's your horizontal asymptote. Now, when we have an h value, which would move your function to the right or to the left, it would also move the asymptote, the vertical one, to the right or to the left. So when we have this function right here, 1 over x plus 2 minus 3, notice that the h value would then be negative 2 because we'd have x minus negative 2, and our k value is negative 3, which means that the vertical asymptote has now shifted to the left 2 spots, which means instead of being right here, it's now left 2 spots. And our horizontal asymptote has now shifted, instead of being right here along the x-axis, it's now down 3 spots. Our a value is 1, which means we multiply the key points by 1, or in other words, the key points haven't changed. And we always use this portion right here where we have moved our vertical asymptotes. That we assume is the new origin. So now we're going to graph the points 1, 1, 2, 1 half, 1 half, 2, and the negatives of those. So from here we graph the point 1, 1, 2, 1 half, 2, also negative 1, negative 1, negative 2, negative a half, and negative a half, negative 2. And you can see that our graph curves through these points and it gets really close to these asymptotes. And there's the graph of our function. All right, here's another example. Notice that your h value is negative 3. Your k value is 1, and your a value is negative 1. So we're going to multiply all of the y values for our key points by negative 1. We've moved the vertical asymptote left 3 spots. We have moved the horizontal asymptote up 1 spot. And so we're going to use this point right here as the new origin. Now we're going to graph our key points, which were 1, 1, 2, 1 half, 1 half, 2, and the negative version of those, negative 1, negative 1, negative 2, negative 1 half, and negative 1 half, comma, negative 2. Now remember that we have this a value of negative 1, so I'm going to multiply all of the y values for each point by negative 1. So that makes all of these first ones, the y value is negative, and all of these second ones, the y values are positive. So now we have the point 1, negative 1, 2, negative a half, and a half, negative 2. We also have the point negative 1, 1, negative 2, a half, and negative 1 half, 2. So now you can see that it has switched where these curves are. It made them negative. What was once up here is now negative, so it's down here. And vice versa. What was negative here has now become positive here. And there's your graph of this function.